I'm Shreya Upadhyay. Let's begin. On the show tonight, we get you details about a possible rift between Donald Trump and J.D. Vance over Iran. While Donald Trump has adopted an aggressive stance, his vice president seems to have taken a more diplomatic, conciliatory approach. More on this up ahead. We also tell you how silver has been breaking records amid geopolitical uncertainties. We'll break down what has been happening in the precious metals sector and why it matters. And Academy Award winner Zoe Saldaña is now officially the highest grossing actors of all times in Hollywood. We trace her cinematic journey tonight. Iran is burning with unrest and the shockwaves are being felt far beyond its borders. For the third straight week, streets across the Islamic Republic remain tense as protesters challenge the regime and security forces respond with deadly force. The rising bloodshed has now pushed the crisis onto the global stage, where Washington could take a decision that may cause ripple effects across West Asia and beyond. Demonstrations continue across Iran despite a sweeping crackdown by the state security forces. A US-based human rights organization now estimates that more than 2,500 people have been killed since the protests began. That figure reflects the scale of the violence in the Islamic Republic. As the death toll climbs, the pressure is building inside the White House. American President Donald Trump is considering whether to strike Iran. The deliberations come as the administration remains sharply divided over how to respond to Tehran's actions. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance is reportedly leading an effort to slow the march toward military action. He and several senior officials are urging the president to put diplomacy first and avoid steps that could trigger a wider regional conflict. Their concern is that United States strikes could strengthen the Iranian leadership's grip on power and derail the protest movement from within. Trump, however, appears increasingly inclined toward a forceful response. The stance, remember, marks another departure from the core promise of the Trump-Vance campaign, which ran on ending American involvement in prolonged foreign wars. Trump and Vance won the 2024 election under the America First banner, pledging to pull the United States out of what they called endless conflicts. Yet, during his second term, President Trump has repeatedly moved in the opposite direction, and he's faced backlash from parts of his own political base after ordering airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities last year, and that criticism is now resurfacing as the current crisis escalates. The president is set to meet with senior advisors to weigh his next moves. Options under review range from cyber operations and expanded sanctions to direct military strikes. Across the Persian Gulf, America's Arab partners are urging restraint. Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Qatar have all warned Washington that any attempt to destabilize Iran's leadership could send oil prices soaring and ultimately damage the American economy. They also fear political blowback within their own borders.
We know that any escalation of the sort that you described would have catastrophic results in the region and beyond, and therefore we want to avoid that as much as possible. The talks continue, our calls continue.
Israel is reportedly urging Washington to show restraint. Israeli officials believe that the Iranian regime has not yet been weakened enough for American strikes to deliver a decisive blow. Their view adds to the caution being voiced by several of America's closest regional partners. Against the threat of possible American strikes, Iran has warned neighbors hosting American troops that it would hit American bases if Washington strikes. According to a Reuters report, the United States is withdrawing some personnel from its major bases in West Asia as a precautionary measure due to high regional tensions. Now, amid all of this, Donald Trump has issued his own warnings. On Tuesday this week, he addressed Iranian demonstrators directly, telling them that help is on its way. And now he said that the United States would respond with what he calls very strong action if Iran begins executing protesters.
I haven't heard about the hanging. If they hang them, you're going to see some things that I don't know what where you come from and what your thought process is, but you'll perhaps be very happy.
What do you mean by that?
We will take very strong action. If they do such a thing, we will take very strong action.
Inside Iran, confirming details remains difficult as authorities restrict internet access, blurring the line between verified information and uncertainty. Reports suggest Iran is preparing to carry out its first execution linked to the protests following mass arrests across the country. The state television has shown large funerals in Tehran for members of the security forces that have been killed during this unrest. At the same time, demonstrations continue in key commercial areas, including Tehran's Grand Bazaar, where videos show the police using tear gas to scatter the crowds. Images circulating on social media appear to show dozens of bodies at Tehran's morgue, offering a glimpse of how sharply the death toll has risen since the early days of the uprising. The crackdown has also ignited protests around the world, with demonstrators rallying in cities from North America to Europe and Australia. Inside Iran, pro-government rallies are also taking place, openly praised by the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Pro-regime demonstrations have surfaced beyond Iran as well. Unconfirmed reports of U.S. aerial refueling tankers positioning in the Hawaii have now sparked speculation about possible long-range military preparations. Analysts say that similar movements were observed before last year's American strikes on Iran as well. As it stands, Iran remains locked in turmoil tonight. Whether this crisis can still be contained or whether it is about to spiral into something far larger may no longer just be Iran's problem and in Iran's hands alone. All right, shifting our focus now, Ukraine is under relentless fire. Russia has increased the intensity of the attacks. Ukrainian front lines are collapsing. As Kiev begs for weapons, Europe is split down the middle. Germany and France are clashing over buying American weapons for Ukraine, and President Macron wants to halt the weapons supply to Ukraine, arguing that European security should be the top priority. Take a look at this report for more details.
Thunderous explosions and the scream of missiles and drones are the permanent terror in Ukraine. Russia has unleashed a brutal, unstoppable aerial blitz, hammering energy grids and military hubs into submission with relentless precision. Kyiv residents are forced to stay in tents in sub-zero temperatures, living and sleeping under constant terror.
честно сказать, не страшно.
To be honest, I am not afraid of cold. It is not scary to get cold. I am afraid of the enemy and the shelling. Because of the cold, I don't want to do anything. Here you can talk to people, support each other, charge our devices.
Підтримаємо друг друга. У нас уже 6-й день, у нас
We are already on the 6th day. On Friday, the attack happened, and since that night, we have had no heating, no water, no light. We can only have light at night. This night, it was from 1 o'clock in the morning until 4 in the morning. The water was cold. There is no heating at all.
холодно.
On the front lines, the situation is even more dire. Russian forces are making rapid gains, forcing the emergency evacuation of children from frontline villages in Zaporizhia. Kiev is hitting back. A daring drone strike recently ignited a massive fire in Russia's Rostov. But the sheer weight of Moscow's offensive is pushing the defenders to the absolute brink. Ukraine says it needs air defense systems, artillery shells and missiles now, not months later. Every delay costs territory. Every shortage costs lives. But just as the pressure peaks, France has slammed the brakes. Paris is blocking Ukraine from using a proposed $104 billion financing mechanism to buy American weapons. France wants the portion earmarked for arms to be spent only within Europe's defense industry. A move framed as strengthening European strategic autonomy. Germany is uneasy. Eastern European states are alarmed, and Ukraine is nervous. Ukraine officials warn that limiting access to US weapons could slow deliveries at a critical moment, weakening defenses just as Russia presses harder. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Well, let's talk about Greenland. Greenland is feeling the heat of the great power politics. This after American president's latest threat to Denmark. Denmark has moved to bolster its troops' presence in the island. And Greenland's government says that a significant number of Danish troops are deployed in the region to continue military exercises and cooperate with regional allies. Greenland also added that the purpose of these Danish troops is to train the ability to operate under the unique Arctic conditions. This is also to strengthen the alliance's footprint for the benefit for both European as well as transatlantic security. This comes after US President called Greenland an important component of his Golden Dome project, which is his flagship air and missile defense system plan. He asserts that owning Greenland would further embolden NATO's defenses. In fact, he took a jibe at Denmark once again, asking the NATO members to get Russians and Chinese out of the territory. The European Union has once again asserted that decisions about Greenland's future rest with Denmark and Greenland, adding that the EU stands with the people of Greenland.
Greenland is part of NATO. And when we are speaking about Arctic security, this is one of the core topics of NATO. And we know that the glue between the allies is the fact that there's always the clear motto, one for all for one. So NATO is one forum to integrate the different interests that are out there.
In Greenland's capital, locals say that the tone has shifted from diplomatic talks to something far more coercive, leaving many fearful about what comes next.
Overwhelming. That I can put that in one word. It is quite overwhelming, especially with the example he set with Venezuela. It is like kind of last year it was a whole different thing. It felt more neutral. It felt more of a negotiation. This year it feels more of a threat.
The concern comes as senior American officials, including Marco Rubio, are hosting Danish and Greenlandic foreign ministers at the White House. A meeting meant to calm tensions, but one that has done little so far to ease public unease. Denmark and Greenland's leaders have made their position clear. The island is not for sale and its future will not be decided by external pressure. Yet, on ground, people say that the uncertainty is deeply personal, affecting families, children, and how they plan for the future. Despite Greenland being covered by the NATO security arrangement, fears of economic coercion or worse are no longer dismissed as unthinkable. Residents speak of anger, fear, and a growing need to think seriously about how to protect their homeland.
I don't know how to prepare myself and my son. I have a 6-year-old, so I don't know how to prepare.
Now, the pressure is also building in Copenhagen. Danish officials are said to be struggling to read Washington's endgame, with growing concern that this standoff could strain or even fracture the Western alliance. As the Arctic emerges as a new geopolitical frontline, Greenland finds itself caught between strategic interests and its people's right to self-determination.
Tensions are obviously extremely high, both here in Greenland and in Denmark. I mean, there's definitely a worry, a fear in Denmark that this is going to tear basically the Western alliance apart. It's a very hard situation for the Danish government to handle, basically because they don't really get what the US president wants.
Well, silver has done what markets once thought was unthinkable. For the first time ever, the white metal has broken above $90 an ounce. Prices briefly surged past $91, while gold climbed to just below record highs. Now, here's why this is big. This is not a routine commodity rally. It is being driven by a rare mix of monetary uncertainty, geopolitical risk, and real stress in physical supply of the metal. Let's break it down for you. First, the Federal Reserve. US inflation data for December came in softer than expected, reviving market bets that interest rate cuts are still coming later this year. That has weakened the dollar and pushed investors back toward hard assets like gold and silver. But there's another factor unsettling the markets: the possible criminal indictment involving US Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. It has raised serious concerns about the central bank's independence, and as a result, global policymakers have quickly closed ranks around Powell. JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon has warned that any move undermining the Fed could damage financial stability. Markets are paying close attention as well. Secondly, geopolitics. Safe haven demand is rising sharply. It's because of tensions escalating across multiple fronts, from the unrest in Iran to renewed American threats involving Greenland to the turmoil in Latin America. The message from investors is simple: when uncertainty rises, money moves into hard assets. But what truly sets this rally apart is what's happening behind the scenes in the physical silver market. Remember, silver is not just going up in price. In many ways, the market is starting to break down. So why does silver matter so much? Because silver is not just a precious metal, it is a critical industrial material. It is one of the best electrical conductors in the world. It is used in electronics, electric vehicle batteries, solar panels, medical devices, and advanced tech. As clean energy, AI infrastructure and defense systems expand silver demand, and that rises with them. At the same time, silver still plays its traditional role as money. It is used in jewelry and coins, especially in India and China, where it is viewed as long-term family wealth. So silver has a dual role, as key industrial metal and as a store of value, which makes this white metal absolutely unique. But unlike gold, the silver market is much smaller. Trading volumes are thinner, inventories are tighter, and liquidity can disappear very quickly. Now, to give you a better understanding of this, the total value of silver stored in London is around $65 billion, whereas gold stored there is worth nearly $1.3 trillion. And so, while the central banks hold massive gold reserves that can be lent out in a crisis, there is no lender of the last resort for silver. And that is why silver moves faster and more violently. Which brings us to the next question. So why did prices explode in 2025? Well, silver usually follows gold, but with bigger swings. Earlier, remember, gold had surged so strongly that the gap between gold and silver became extreme at one point. 1 ounce of gold could buy more than 100 ounces of silver. Many investors saw silver as undervalued and rushed in. At the same time, high government debt in the US and Europe pushed investors toward real assets, away from paper money and bonds. And then came the supply problem. Global silver production has struggled for years. Ore quality is falling, new mining projects are limited, and environmental and regulatory hurdles have slowed output in key producers like Mexico, Peru, and China. Another issue is that most silver isn't mined directly. It is a byproduct of other metals. So supply cannot easily respond to higher prices. For the 5th year in a row, global demand has exceeded mine supply. Then the market seized up. Fears of possible American tariffs sent silver rushing into New York walls, draining supply from London. More than 100 million ounces flowed into silver-backed ETFs. By October, during India's festive buying season, borrowing costs spiked, prices jumped, and liquidity dried up. Then concerns over Chinese export controls. And silver being labeled a US critical mineral only added fuel to the rally. Even Elon Musk weighed in, warning that silver is essential for many industrial processes. And now we're seeing visible signs of strain. US silver eagle coins are selling for over $100 per coin. Analysts say this is not a speculative bubble, but a structural shortage years in the making. Some estimates suggest that billions of ounces of paper silver claims are backed by only a fraction of physical metal. In fact, Citigroup now sees silver at $100 in the near term. Some industry voices are even calling for $150 by year end, which is why markets are asking the question, is this just another rally or a permanent repricing of silver itself? Donald Trump is expected to announce the formation of a new international board of peace this week. The committee is aimed at overseeing his ambitious post-war plan for Gaza. Remember, this comes even as ongoing violence and political deadlock cast doubt on its prospects. As per officials, the board will be chaired by President Trump and composed of 15 global leaders. They will be primarily heads of state or government. It is designed to implement a 20-point plan to transform the devastated Palestinian enclave following the war between Israel and Hamas. The board's mandate includes helping establish an interim government to replace Hamas. It will also mobilize international funding for reconstruction and attracting foreign security force to stabilize Gaza before a Palestinian government is actually formed. Now, the head of the Palestinian Academic and Arab Americans for Peace, Bishara Bahba, told an Arab news outlet that several Arab countries will participate, including Qatar and Egypt. Both were key mediators in the ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas. He also added that US, UK, Germany, and Italy are all expected to join this board as well. The announcement is reportedly set to take place on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos. Now, this plan emerges against a backdrop of continuing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The UN said that at least 100 children have been killed by Israeli airstrikes and ground operations in Gaza since a fragile ceasefire that began 3 months ago. Gaza's health ministry, which maintains the casualty records, reported an even higher figure, saying that 165 children were killed during the same period. out of a total of 442 deaths that were reported. In November last year, Gaza's authorities said more than 70,000 people had been killed since the start of Israel's Hamas war. The UN says nearly 80% of buildings in Gaza have been destroyed or damaged in this relentless air and ground offensive. And adding to the crisis, Israel on the 1st of January suspended 37 international aid agencies from accessing the Gaza Strip. The UN described this move as outrageous. Now, as diplomatic efforts intensify, questions remain over whether this new board of peace can deliver stability and reconstruction to a territory still reeling from the aftershock of the war. And coming up on Gravitas next, Donald Trump is doubling down on illegal immigrants using his ICE officers. We also tell you how researchers are now contradicting the microplastic claim, saying its spread has been exaggerated. And a look at how the future of Arctic hangs in balance as Trump and Rubio eye the island of Greenland. The Pentagon is launching a fresh review of women serving in ground combat roles, more than a decade after those positions were formally open to them. The review comes amid renewed debate inside the American military and long-standing skepticism from the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, about whether women should serve in certain frontline combat units. Women were officially integrated into ground combat roles in 2015. Today, around 4,500 women serve across the Army and Marine Corps in the infantry, armor, and artillery units, with a small number even qualifying for the Special Forces. Now, the Pentagon is reassessing how those units perform. According to a report by the ABC News, an internal memo suggests that the 6-month review will examine performance data, training outcomes, and staffing across ground combat units. The findings are expected to inform future decisions on how those units are structured and trained. Pentagon officials say the review is not about gender, but standards. In a statement, Pentagon Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson said that combat standards will be elite, uniform, and sex-neutral, adding that the weight of a rucksack or a wounded soldier does not care whether someone is a man or a woman. Now, at the center of this issue is the experience of women who were among the first to step into the roles once close to them. One of them is Elizabeth Dempsey Beggs. As per the report, Beggs was commissioned through the Army's Reserve Officers Training Corps. She graduated in 2018 and chose one of the military's most demanding paths, commanding tanks. The armor field requires mastery of some of the heaviest weapons in the U.S. arsenal and constant tactical precision. She was among the first women to enter the field and soon found herself leading soldiers at Fort Riley, Kansas, but entering a space that had long been exclusively male. It came with skepticism. Beck said some questioned whether women could handle hand-to-hand combat training, which involves close physical contact, or manage basic realities of life in the field. She said she approached those doubts directly, answering questions openly and without judgment. And over time, she says, attitudes changed. Once soldiers actually served alongside women in combat roles, the skepticism largely faded. But now the Pentagon review comes after years of studies on women in combat units. Many of those studies, including by the services themselves, found no degradation in the overall unit performance. A Marine Corps study did find women were more likely to suffer injuries, a point often cited by critics. In fact, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has long opposed women serving in the frontline combat roles, though his position has now evolved over time. In a September address to troops, Hegseth had framed the issue around standards rather than gender, saying that if women meet the rigorous gender-neutral requirements, they should be allowed to serve. He had said, and I quote him, If women can make it, excellent. If not, it is what it is. That stance contrasts sharply with the remarks that Hegseth had made before taking office, including in his 2024 book, where he argued that women should not serve in combat units. Comments widely viewed as openly hostile to the idea. The review also comes at a time of broader change inside the military. 2 decades of war in Iraq and Afghanistan, blurred traditional front lines, often placing women in combat conditions even before formal restrictions were lifted. Many served under fire and were recognized for their acts of valor. The US Army has also recently implemented gender-neutral standards for combat jobs, while revamping how physical fitness and body fat measurements are assessed across the force. The Pentagon's findings are expected later this year, and it could shape how the American military defines combat readiness in the years ahead. Former US President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton have openly defied congressional subpoena demanding their testimony in a House investigation into the Jeffrey Epstein case. It has set up a high-stakes confrontation with Republican lawmakers. In a letter released on social media, the Clintons called out the House oversight body's probe and accused its chair, Republican Congressman James Comer, of pursuing a process which they say is literally designed to result in their imprisonment. The Clintons said that they will forcefully defend themselves, arguing that Comer has allowed other former officials to provide written statements about Epstein while selectively enforcing subpoenas against them. There are 8 other people who were issued this subpoena. Naturally, Comer has said that he's prepared to move for contempt of Congress if the former president and the First Lady do not appear. The Republican-led Oversight Committee subpoenaed the Clintons, remember, back in August last year as part of a review of the government's handling of the Epstein case. The dispute comes as Republicans face growing pressure over the Justice Department's delayed release of the Epstein files, despite legislation requiring all documents to be made public by the 19th of December. Now remember, last week lawmakers asked a federal judge to appoint a special master to compel the full release of those files. In recent months, the Justice Department has released batches of documents, photographs included in the release, and they show Bill Clinton with Epstein in the late 1990s and early 2000s. This also includes images of Clinton swimming and sitting in a hot tub. Clinton has acknowledged a friendly relationship with Jeffrey Epstein during that period, but he has denied any knowledge of Epstein's crimes. In fact, survivors of Epstein's abuse have not accused Clinton of wrongdoing. This controversy over the Epstein case intensified last July, when the Justice Department released a memo declaring the matter closed. Now, this move that conflicted with conspiracy theories embraced by Donald Trump and some of his allies during the 2024 campaign. Historically, multiple former presidents have voluntarily testified before the Congress, but none has ever been compelled to do so. And that precedent was cited by Trump in 2022 when a House committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack subpoenaed him. The committee eventually withdrew that subpoena. Comer has also said that the Oversight Committee will not attempt to compel testimony from Trump regarding Epstein. He's argued that a sitting president cannot be forced to testify. Donald Trump, who is also friendly with Epstein, has said that he cut off that relationship before Epstein was accused of sexual abuse. From America, let's shift our focus to Britain, where there's mounting political pressure on the government to block plans for a controversial Chinese mega embassy in central London. MPs are calling on the government to block the plan amid concerns over national security, espionage and foreign interference. Members of the parliament from across the political spectrum, including Labour, the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, the SNP and the DUP, have all reportedly stepped up calls for the project to be rejected, arguing it could pose serious risks to Britain's security and democratic institutions. But the government insists no final decision has been made yet. The proposed embassy site sits opposite the Tower of London, on land once occupied by the Royal Mint. Now, if approved, it would become the largest embassy in Europe, which is a development that China has pursued since purchasing the site for £255 million in 2018. But critics say this is no ordinary planning application. Conservative MPs have described the project as a potential launchpad for economic warfare. They have cited reports that the embassy design includes secret rooms and a concealed underground chamber positioned next to fiber optic cables, carrying sensitive financial and communications data into the City of London. Shadow Home Office Minister Alicia Kearns told the Parliament that access to those cables could expose millions of Britain's emails, financial records and commercial data, and give the Chinese Communist Party unprecedented intelligence reach inside the UK. She's also warned approving the embassy would send the wrong political signal, especially at a time when China continues to detain British nationals and Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai. Labour voices have joined this criticism as well. Sarah Champion, the chair of Parliament's International Development Select Committee, has said that multiple UK government agencies as well as Britain's international partners have raised alarms about this project. She told MPs that every security briefing that she has received identifies China as a hostile state, and she said that she has no doubt that the embassy should not go ahead. The issue was debated in the House of Commons as well during an urgent session, which exposed growing frustration with the government's handling of this matter. Planning Minister Matthew Pennycook told MPs that it would be inappropriate to comment on a live planning case, but said all national security concerns would be fully considered before a decision is made, and that is expected on or before the 20th of January. He in fact acknowledged that China poses serious threats to UK's national security, but also pointed out that Beijing remains the world's second largest economy and Britain's third largest trading partner. That response has done little to satisfy critics. Liberal Democrat MP Bobby Dean accused the government of treating the issue as a routine planning matter, warning that this decision carries huge diplomatic and strategic consequences. The controversy, remember, comes at a sensitive moment in the UK-China relationship. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is reportedly planning a visit to China later this year. It would be the first by a British leader since 2018. And approval of the embassy has long been a diplomatic priority for Beijing. On Monday, 9 Labour MPs reportedly wrote directly to the Housing Secretary, urging him to block the project. For now, the Starmer government insists that no decision has been taken, but with rare cross-party unity forming in the opposition, pressure clearly is intensifying over whether Britain is willing to trade security concerns for diplomatic engagement with China. The debate is expected to get louder as the decision's deadline approaches. With Donald Trump's escalating actions against migrants, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, is facing fresh scrutiny, and not just on the streets, but also inside its detention centers. The spotlight on ICE intensified after the fatal shooting of a protester, Renee Nicole Good, in Minneapolis on the 7th of January this year. But new agency data shows that for many migrants, the greatest danger may come after the arrest. In just the first 10 days of 2026, at least 4 people have died while in ICE custody. 3 of those deaths were announced in a 2-day span from 9th and 10th of January. That's an alarming start to the year. All 4 were men between 42 and 68 years old. 2 were from Honduras, 1 from Cuba, and 1 from Cambodia. Now, ICE says the 2 died from heart-related health issues, while the causes of the other 2 deaths remain unclear. Only 1 case is formally under investigation. The latest deaths follow a record-breaking and deadly year. In 2025, at least 30 migrants died in ICE detention, the highest number in more than 2 decades, and the deadliest year since the agency was created. According to data from ICE reports, that single year alone saw more deaths than the entire 4 years of the Biden administration, during which 26 people had died in ICE custody. Advocacy groups say that the trend is no accident. A 2024 report from the American Civil Liberties Union found that up to 95% of deaths in ICE detention could have been prevented with proper medical care. After reviewing thousands of pages of government records, medical experts identified systemic failures, including misdiagnosis, inappropriate treatment, and dangerous delays in care. The laws of physics are being rewritten in a high-stakes race against the clock. Scientists are challenging the ultimate frontier, hunting for a loophole in the fabric of the universe. Can we travel back in time? Watch the story to know more.
Imagine stepping into a chamber and emerging a decade before you were born. For a century, this was a mathematical impossibility. A tantalizing idea for numerous science fiction movies and novels. Now, a team of elite physicists in China are solving the puzzle. They are tackling the century-old puzzle of whether the arrow of time can be forced to fly backward. This is about the fundamental structure of space and time itself. Researchers have proposed a new theoretical framework showing that time's arrow, the one-way flow from past to future, which arises naturally from how quantum particles become interconnected. This groundbreaking idea doesn't depend on observations or disturbances from outside. It suggests that the direction of time is built into the fabric of quantum physics itself. In theory, Einstein's relativity and certain quantum models allow paths through space-time that loop back on themselves, the so-called closed time-like curves which in principle could let an object return to its own past. But such loops lead straight into classic paradoxes, like the grandfather paradox. What happens if a traveler goes back and prevents their own birth? Yet the quest continues. Some researchers have explored quantum simulations that mimic backward time effects, and even mathematical models aimed at resolving paradoxes without breaking the universe. If proven, then the stakes are astronomical. The basic understanding of our universe will change. The impossible would become possible. For now, it remains a domain of science fiction. Modern science is yet to come to a conclusion. So for now, look up and stare at the stars. Some of them aren't simply there. We are only seeing their light, which emanated millions and billions of years ago. Bureau Report. WION World is one.
And now a story straight out of a Hollywood movie, only this time it was real and horrifying. A former separatist leader, dubbed as a godfather, met his end in the most dramatic way possible. Alain Orsoni, a well-known figure of Corsica in France, was shot dead at his mother's funeral. While the motive for this murder hasn't been ascertained yet, the police revealed that the bullet was fired by a sniper from hundreds of meters away, indicating that this was a professional hit job. Orsoni's death was put back the focus on allegations of a nexus between Corsica's separatist political groups and criminal gangs. The 71-year-old leader was attracted to Corsican separatism in the 1970s. He was the first who was arrested in 1980 and detained for 18 months for an attack on police officers in Paris. 3 years later, his brother Guy was kidnapped. While 2 suspects were arrested on suspicion of his murder, gunmen close to him raided the prison where they were held and shot them dead. Orsoni also founded the Movement for Self-Determination Party and was elected to the Corsican Assembly in 1986. While Orsoni fled to Nicaragua in 1996, after violent factionalism, he returned to Corsica only in 2008. Now, during this phase, he played a role in the revival of the Corsican football club, Ajaccio, which played in France's top football division. He even took over as the chairman of this club and served in this position until 2023. While he returned to Nicaragua in 2015, he visited Corsica intermittently, staying in a heavily guarded villa during his stay there. But with this latest murder, it remains to be seen whether gang wars in Corsica will erupt once again. Moving on. In a race against time, scientists have launched a unique ice sanctuary in Antarctica to preserve what they call the planet's frozen memory as glaciers across the world rapidly melt due to climate change. Researchers are now extracting and storing ice cores from endangered regions before those glaciers disappear forever. What ails the human body remains a matter of continuous study. Microplastics, which are tiny plastic fragments broken down from plastic waste, have come under scanner for their rising presence in the human body. However, emerging research has now cast a serious doubt on this. A study published in the Nature Medicine journal in February last year detected an exponential rise in microplastic contamination of brains from 1997 till 2024. Alarm bells were sounded when another research came to the fore, which reported that patients with microplastics in their carotid artery have a greater risk of a heart attack. If research were to be believed, every liter of bottled water contains 10,000 nanoplastic particles. These findings have been criticized by other scientists. They have raised concerns over the methodology and the absence of quality control while measuring levels of microplastics. For instance, critics have highlighted that most of these studies don't test blank samples. Not minimizing or excluding hazardous substances in the test environment can lead to inaccurate results. Scientists have also reasoned that the analytical approach in microplastic studies is often not robust enough. While scientists warn against framing misguided policies based on faulty evidence on the level of microplastics, they've also stressed that this issue should not be taken lightly, as plastic pollution remains a potent threat with less than 10% plastics recycled globally every year. Everyone desires to live longer, but is there a quick fix solution for this? Well, scientists have now deduced that small tweaks to your lifestyle can have a significant impact. A study published in the Lancet journal examined data from 135,000 people aged in their 50s and 60s in UK, Norway, Sweden, and United States. They wore pedometers to measure their activity levels. It looked at the impact of moderate to vigorous activity, which includes brisk walking, mowing the lawn, cycling, and swimming. Deaths before the age of 75 were defined as premature. Now let's take a closer look at this study. It found that going for a 10-minute walk every day can cut, risk of dying early by 15%. Even reducing the time spent sitting every day by 30 minutes can result in lowering premature deaths by 5%. The studies also observed that a mere 5-minute increase in daily physical activity can decrease the population's early death rate by 10%. A healthy lifestyle also matters. The researchers found that people who exercised the most had the best sleep and had the most healthy diets lived 9.35 years more compared to others. Now, while this research has its limitations as it is an observational study which cannot prove causation, it provides hope for people who are less active physically. Timely action can go a long way evading a premature death. Festive fervour has gripped India as harvest festivals have lit up the nation, from the bonfires of Lohri to the sweet celebrations of Pongal and the music and dance of Bihu to the sky-filled kites of Makar Sankranti. Take a look at how communities across the country came together to thank the season's harvest. And from one good news to the other, in the ever-shifting landscape of show business, Zoe Saldaña has officially ascended a status which was once perceived to be unreachable, mainly for women, and even more for those who hailed from a separate race which wasn't dominating the industry. With the ongoing theatrical run of the latest Avatar movie, Saldaña has secured her position as the highest-grossing actor of 2026. Saldaña rose to this status after featuring in a series of blockbusters, and now she remains the only performer in the history of cinema to star in 4 films which have crossed the coveted $2 billion mark. In 2009, she featured as Neytiri in James Cameron's directorial Avatar. The movie went on to earn $2 billion. In 2018, she featured as Gamora in Avengers Infinity War. The Marvel blockbuster crossed the coveted $2 billion mark as well. The following year, Marvel delivered another blockbuster with Avengers Endgame, where she returned as Gamora. Then in 2022, Zoe returned to the character of Neytiri in Avatar, The Way of Water. This movie went on to earn $2.32 billion. And this December 2025 release, Avatar Fire and Ice earned $1.233 billion. The movie is still running successfully across theatres. Now, Zoe Saldaña's success is also boosted by her roles in the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. The Marvel movie series collectively earned $2.4 billion. Meanwhile, the Star Trek reboot series added another $1.18 billion. At present, Zoe Saldaña ranks first with a cumulative global box office collection of $15.47 billion. Scarlett Johansson is in the second position with $15.4 billion. Samuel Jackson is in the third spot with $14.6 billion. Other stars in the top 5 include Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Pratt. All of these Hollywood stars have played pivotal roles in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But this achievement is a huge win for women of color in an industry historically dominated by white male leads. Zoe Saldaña, who is of Dominican and Puerto Rican descent, has shattered the glass ceiling of the box office. And on that happy note, it's time to wrap this edition of Gravitas. But before we go, we'll take a look at all that has been making news across the world in these images. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Bye-bye.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS Centenary Year, Kesariya at 100.
This is our brand new edition of South India, a daily dynamic show that will capture the pulse of the southern Indian state.
By blending special stories, stories of the day, breaking alerts and cultural vignettes. From the 7 days. The world's most powerful minds gather. Decisions that shape our future are made. From the Swiss Alps to you. Starting January 19th, WION will deep dive into the significance of what global leaders are deliberating at the World Economic Forum. The coverage will feature key roundtable discussions every day with top analysts at WION's headquarters. Stay tuned as we break down key themes from the Davos Forum to make it simple and engaging for you, only on WION.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 100